First up, you need to go into Google and find your images. I'm going to start with a background, but the first thing you need to do is when you're searching for your images, go to Search Tools, Size, Larger Than, and select 4MP. This will just ensure that the images that you pick won't be pixelated when they go into Photoshop. When you select your images, be careful and plan ahead in your mind what you're going to do. Don't pick a background that already has subject matter in it, so a tree or a house or a figure that dominates the scene. You want to have enough room to move around and create the scene that you want to create for your surrealist image. Make sure that when you save the image, you select View Image and get the full image up and save that file, not the thumbnail version that you saw before. So right click, Save As, and make sure that you call the image something that you can recall, and also select a new folder or create a new folder, name it something like Surrealist Photoshop, and then you can store all your images that you saved from Google there. Next up, you're going to find a man in a suit. Now, after you've selected this image, you need to find another image or object to replace his head with. So I'm going to go with a pocket watch because it kind of matches with the idea that men in business suits are concerned with time. Then you're going to locate an aquatic creature, and this is going to be placed in the sky. So it should be swimming or something like that. I'm going to go with a shark because it reminds me of how ferocious businessmen are supposed to be. Lastly, find a texture. This will be placed over the whole image, so think carefully. Now we're in Photoshop. Select File, New, and this window will pop up. Make sure you put in Surrealist Artwork and your name. Width should be 2300 pixels, height 1100 pixels, resolution 300, and the background contents should be transparent. Click OK. Next, go to File, Open, and find where you saved the images and select Open. They'll all open in separate tabs. You'll find that each image is locked as a background, shown by the little lock icon on the layer. If you right-click it, press Duplicate Layer, OK, select the layer with the lock icon, select the trash icon and press OK, then you'll have a free layer. If you press the eye icon on that, it'll make the layer disappear and you'll see the transparent background. The opacity bar adjusts the transparency of the layer. At the very top of the screen, you'll see Show Transform Controls. If you click that box, you make sure that you've got those little lines and those little tiny boxes in the corners. It'll let you play around with the size and scale of the image. If you press Shift, it won't change in the proportions of the image. You can actually hover the layer right over onto your other image, your main file that you've created, and pull it over, drag it across, and you can get one file from one tab or one layer from one tab to the other. Then you can resize and reshape your image as you see fit. Remember, if you hold Shift down, it won't change the proportions of the image. You can go to the bottom and play around with the scale so you can see just what you're working with. 100% is full size, and then less is smaller and large is a bigger scale. Then what you want to do is you want to start to think about how you're going to position all your subjects. So I'm going to start with the man in the suit. Right click and select the Quick Selection tool. It's your fourth icon down in your toolbar. Remember to make sure that your layer is unlocked. Drag it down. The white background makes it easier because the selection tool, it selects the pixels that you're highlighting. So since this has a white background, it goes straight to all the white pixels. You'll notice as I bring across this layer to my main file that I'm working on, that the layers mean that when it's higher up, it's first in line to be seen. So the very top layer is the one that will be first in line to be seen. Sometimes you'll find that you need to clean up an image. So if you click a little icon down the very bottom, just right next to the trash can, you can create a new layer. And using the paint bucket tool, you can make that layer black, and it'll make all those little white lines stay up. So pick a colour that will let you see all the little mistakes. Then you can go back with an eraser and clean up those little parts that you may have missed. Another little trick to do is to make sure that your figure doesn't look so cut out, which means if you got to the top, you'll see there's a number of types of erasers. The best way to figure it out is to just play around with them and see which has soft edges and which has hard edges. You want to find something with a soft edge, because what you can do is run that along the edge of the figure, and it actually makes it look a little bit more realistic and less cut out, and it makes it blend with the other layers a lot more easily. So following that, once you've gone around your figure and you've kind of cleaned up everything, you can also try and figure out if you've left any little holes in the figure. Now, that can be where the magnetic tool that selects those white pixels can sometimes get a little crazy and flip into the hand or other areas that you might find. So what you can do is use an eyedropper tool, which we'll just see coming up in just a second. Now, this eyedropper tool can be created by going into the paintbrush tool, pressing Option and selecting the colour that you want by just hovering over that colour, and then your paintbrush will pick up that colour. So see how I'm just picking up the colours that I want from the areas that I've selected, and I'm just filling in that hand a little bit more just to make sure that it doesn't look too cut out and too pasty. So we want to make it look nice and realistic, as close as we can. Now, when I did those touch-ups with the paintbrush tool, I actually created those on a new layer. So if I made a mistake, I could rub that out and not the figure of the man. But I like that now, so I want to merge those layers. So what I'm going to do is select both those layers, make sure they're both highlighted, right-click, press Merge Layers, and now I can move them all together. So I'm going to take them over and put them on my backgrounds and adjust the scale using the box around him to bring him down to the size that I want, and then move him around and position him where I feel it fits best. Now he's facing into the center of the screen, which is compositionally quite attractive. Next, I'm going to cut out the object that I'm going to use to replace his head with, the pocket watch. I'm going to drag that across and reshape that so I can just position it over his head. Now what you can do is go to the very side of the box, the very corner, and you can see that you can really play around with the constraints of an image. You can completely change the orientation of it. You can flip it on itself, rotate it. You'll see when I do it with the shark. And you can really have control of where you want to position all your objects on your background that you've selected. So watch now as I bring across the hammerhead shark, now that I've cut him all out just the same way we have before. Same tools, just bring him across. I'm going to scale him down and I'm going to flip him back on himself and use those rotating edges. All you have to do to get those rotating edges is hover up into the corner, and you'll find that your little arrow has this little curved arrow on either side, and if you just swing that around, you can adjust the shape of your figure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a shadow. Now I've created a new layer, that's that little icon right next to the trash tool, and I'm going to play with the opacity. I'm just going to paint in black basically, and then adjust the opacity so it kind of looks a little bit more faded, like a shadow. After that, I'm going to try and draw in the shape of the shark. Just underneath, not worrying too much about the shape. I'm going to make sure my paintbrush is feathered, and when I go back with an eraser that's also feathered, I'm just going to sharpen up any edges and any points that I feel need to be adjusted. Now when I select this layer with the tool that's the very first tool in the toolbar, I can now get those constraints up, that little box that helps me change the shape. And I'm going to squish the shadow so it looks more realistic. I'm just going to squish it down and position it so it looks like the light's hitting his back and the shadow is being cast beneath. Now I'm going to bring in my texture. I'm going to drag it across and make it in an unlocked layer just like I have with everything else. Drag it across to my file and place it over the top. See how I had to bring that layer, drag it all the way to the top in order for it to be the first one? That's what you need to do and be sure of. And see those little arrows? That's my little arrow to turn and spin around the constraints. Push it across, apply the transformation, and see that opacity bar? We're going to play with that. And then we're going to get a feathered eraser, which is just the one with the soft edges. Make it nice and big. And we're just going to select some little areas that we want to pop out. So we want the eye of the viewer to focus on the man in the suit and the shark. That's our main points, our main subjects. You might want to add a little bit to the background. If so, you might want to make the brush a little bit larger so your eraser is just nice and soft and gentle and not too hard. You can always undo what you've done and go back and adjust it by pressing Ctrl Z, and you can play around and make sure that what you've selected is what you like. After that, you can select all the layers, right click, press merge layers, so they're all one layer now. You can go to images, adjustments, and select black and white. Press OK, and then go to image, adjustments, brightness, contrast. And then you can play around with the darkness and the lightness of the image. It just really brings it out. And then you're done. Alright, so after that, you can crop it as you wish. If there's any little points, any little side bits that you might have missed, you can go to image and crop using that little selecting tool, which is the second icon down. You can crop it to however you wish, however you desire. And once you're happy with it, file, save as, or save if you're happy with the name that you've chosen, and you're all done. Congratulations, you've made your Surrealist Photoshop.